Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the Best of MarDreamin Summit. I'm so excited because we're here to bring you the top takeaways, all the insights that were shared by the industry experts, the solutions, and also equip you with actionable next steps that you can take in order to actually apply what you learned, whether it was live during the conference or on today's session virtually to your organization. And that way you can advance your business, advance your skills, and then also find new ways to better engage your customers and drive real growth. And before we get fully started, go ahead and find the chat. Say hi, where you're joining us from today. Also, you'll notice that there's already a few polls in there for you to start voting on. We'll address those results later. So go ahead and do that. And if you lose sight of those polls at any point in time, you can just click the polls tab on the right-hand side there. And I already see people saying hi where they're coming from. So amazing. Okay. So MarDreamin Summit, it was the first ever in-person MarDreamin conference. For those of you who are familiar with MarDreamin, it has been a virtual conference for years that started during COVID when we weren't able to meet in person. And we've gotten a lot of requests over the years of asking, hey, when are we going to meet in person and do this? And this year was the first time that we were actually able to make it happen, which was amazing, I must say. Attendees were able to connect, they were able to share their war stories, share their challenges. They were able to solution together, troubleshoot, build relationships. And the biggest resounding takeaway that I heard people say is it's nice to know that we're not the only one working through these issues and trying to accomplish these types of goals. So, to help us really unpack all of the amazing magic that happened live at the conference, we're going to be diving into the top takeaways from the opening keynote, and then we'll unpack the big themes that were really discussed at the conference, including AI and innovation, sales and marketing alignment, and analytics. And to help us do so, we have our expert speakers with us. And let's get started with meeting them. Angelica, we'll start with you.
Hey everyone, Angelica Cabral here. I am a marketing manager at Circonte. Previously was a consultant, so I switched over to the dark side is what we like to say. But I'm excited to be here, and I will pass it over to Heather to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Rinke. I'm Salesforce Product Director at Circonte. And I've been sort of on both sides, and both on the customer side as well as on the consulting side. Also spent a few years working with clients directly before taking on the role of director, and really happy to talk about some of the cool things that we're going to share with you today. And I'll pass to Kara.
Hey everyone, Kara Clanton Pope. I'm the Serum Analytics Program Manager here at Circonte. So all things analytics and reporting. So really excited to chat. I'll say a little bit about my background. Was I call it a recovering marketer, though I kind of love this like to the dark side. I was a marketer way back when. Fell in love with the account engagement tool so much. I went to the mothership, worked at Salesforce for many years, and then loved analytics so much from there. I wanted to share the good word and came over to Circonte. And so here just to help anything and everything when it comes to reporting. And I'll kick it back to Christina.
Thanks, Kara. And I'm Christina Anderson, marketing strategist at Circonte. I had the pleasure of getting to work on a few of the main stage sessions that happened there and also host one of the lively panels that you'll get to hear about later on. So first, before we fully dive in, I did want to get started with our first poll, which is around the idea of what MarDreamin inspires you to do. And this all centers around the community wall, which is actually what you're seeing a picture of there that we had live on site. And what we really wanted was the community to have a chance to engage and share how this event series and community has impacted them. And that's really what it's all about. We're here to be able to help us all connect, engage, better ourselves, whether it's to master new skills, pay it forward, or feel deeper connected and grow our network, or just grow in our career. And looking at the results that you all already started voting on, it looks like the majority of you are inspired to master new skills, which is super exciting. And I commend you on that anytime you're able to master a new skill, because the more that you know how to use and maximize the technology that you have, the more you're going to be empowered to really get creative and strategic and create those very memorable experiences for your customers and drive those deeper relationships. So first, I'd like to kick us off with unpacking our opening keynote, the state of marketing. And our founder and CEO delivered this, Andrea, and she really emphasized that this is the era to turn off autopilot and question everything. And reason being is because with all of the new technology coming out, buyer behaviors are shifting and also expectations are rising. And so with that, we can't do what we've always done and expect that same success that we've had in the past. Therefore, we need to be able to shift. And to do that, we need to make a conscious effort to really stop and say, okay, what are we doing? And are we doing it in the best way? And how are we engaging our customers? So to help guide that consideration and evaluation, Andrea boiled it down to these five key questions to ask in 2025. The first being around how can I make it seamless, meaning the buyer experience. How can we make it as easy for a buyer as possible and meet them right where they are? Second one being around is, do we have the right marketing mix? This is referring to your campaigns, to your channels, and your technology. With everything shifting, do you have the right marketing mix to engage your buyers where they are? Next is aligning around growth. Are your sales, marketing, and customer success teams aligned around a shared goal, vision, in order to give your customer that connected experience no matter where they are in their journey? The fourth one is around being good at change. With all these shifts that I just mentioned happening, we have to be ready to shift. And if we aren't good at change, then it's going to be difficult in order to shift when we really need to make the biggest impact. And then lastly, what's your next move with AI? And everyone in the audience here, we're all at different stages with this, and all that matters is that you're moving forward. Even if you haven't gotten started yet, we understand there could be, whether it's just knowing where to get started, lacking that path forward. The main piece here is to just make sure that you're having that consideration and you are taking those next steps. And we'll get into that in a little bit of how to do that. Just to further showcase the state of the era that we're in right now and tie those questions back to just some stats that are illustrating the trends. So as far as like, how can you make your buying experience more seamless? The fact is that the majority of buyers still feel that the process isn't seamless. In fact, their latest purchase was either very complex or difficult. That's crazy. People today, they don't have the patience to want to really further engage with companies or with vendors that aren't able to give them an experience that's easy, relevant, and convenient for them. Next one being around that idea of knowing if you have the right marketing mix in place. So buyer and user behavior is changing. Just one example of that is the amount of Google searches that are now ending in 0 clicks, and the increase that has happened where people are turning to tools like ChatGPT to do a lot of their searching and get started in that search process. And then the idea around aligning your team on growth, disconnect and dysfunction is still alive and well. That's nothing to laugh at though, because when you have shared initiatives, you shouldn't have conflicting priorities, but it's more sad that that's still the case of what we're dealing with today. However, though, what you'll find later in our sales and marketing alignment portion of this recap is that every team is still working on this. And what really matters is that you are still making those iterative improvements and having those conversations. So, in order to really take action here and just to simplify all of this, what you really want to be thinking about is like, okay, how can I simply meet our buyers today where they are and provide a connected experience no matter where they are in their journey and make it as easy as possible? And then on the internal side, okay, so how do we do that as effectively as possible? Meaning that we have the right campaigns, channels, technology, that we are aligned on a shared vision and goal, and that we do have the documentation and processes in place in order to be good at making those shifts and changing when we need to. And then continually thinking, okay, what is our next move with AI? How are we going to continue, iterate, and advance ourselves as a business to create those better experiences for our customer? And I know that so many people have just had their LinkedIn feeds and inboxes flooded around the AI hype, and you're burnt out. Cue the eye roll. You're sick of it. So going beyond the hype, just real talk. This technology is at our fingertips. It's up to us to be able to use it and decide how we're actually going to take advantage of the tools that are out there available to advance our business and then also make those experiences that much better for our customers. And which this is the perfect tie-in to our first big theme recap with Ann Innovation. And to do so, I'm going to hand it off to Heather. Heather, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Christina. So we're going to talk a little bit about some insights that came out of the AI and innovation side at the event. So throughout the event, through workshops, sessions, conversations, we heard a number of common themes when it came to getting started with when it comes to incorporating AI, and most people we found like in some point have been asked to own something AI related in their organization. But the majority are feeling very lost on where to start and where to get like what to do first. And that was really overwhelmingly the biggest challenge that we heard throughout the event. And a lot of people actually thought it was refreshing to know that they weren't alone, that there were others feeling the same way. And there was like sort of some, common concerns or common challenges. And some of the other roadblocks that came up in conversations were things like data. Data was big, right? So the data is either all over the place, it's in different systems that are not connected. Maybe the data isn't clean. Maybe it's there's a lot of duplicates, a lot of dirty data. There's that lack of trust both in the data and the reliance on that, and just the ability of AI. You hear things, people talk about hallucinations and just the ability to have that reliability in AI being able to be able to provide value. Another perspective was just all the discussion around AI and like the technology involved and the need for the having specific skills, requiring specific skills in order to be able to use AI, highly technical skills rather. And just the perception that needing to be an AI engineer, or just that like the fear of not really having the resources to deal with it or to incorporate it. Use cases was another common roadblock, just not really feeling where this might be where there might be advantages or benefits within the organization. And then there's also the internal resistance, potentially, folks not wanting to really incorporate it because of, what it might do and how it might impact them or their jobs. And then ultimately with all of that, being able to see ROI. So there's, to be able to see that after the investment, putting time in, are we really going to see benefit? So there were a lot of things that came out that people were talking about, and these were common throughout the session, or throughout the conference rather. And so one of the things that became clear is, through conversations and through some of the content and sessions presented is, just like whenever you're stuck on something, I mean, and this could be with AI, and it also is could be the case with other themes, is if you're feeling challenges, there's things you can do iteratively to start working towards a plan, instead of boiling the ocean and just looking at things and unpacking them, and things become clear and a little bit more attainable as you start to put that path together. And as those conversations were happening, a lot, things were starting to come out, right? People were starting to think about like, oh, where could this help? Where, now I'm now starting to see where there might be some use cases. So shifting from that, I don't know where to start, but looking at where there might be some opportunities. And so use cases that were talked about were things like helping with content generation, both, marketing assets, but, also like helping arm our sales teams in just making sure that they have the right messaging and the talking points in order to be able to talk to their prospects. Being able to have like front end customer experience. So having AI help with some of that case deflection, or helping to make the customer experience just that much more personal in order to answer questions when they need it. Being able to help with segmentation, or helping to help with custom lead qualification. So there's a lot of different things and themes that came out of discussions. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? These are just some of the things that came out. And this is starting, some of this is having, the idea of, where do we go now? We've got some ideas on where this could get started. What do we do now? And so this is just helping organizations can start taking the next step and figuring out where to go and how to get there on their AI roadmap. And we sort of talk through different stages of this process. So first is defining that vision. So figuring out, what are the things that we need to think about in terms of the why? What are the goals? Where are we going to see benefits as an individual? Who's going to benefit from this? And because there's no point in incorporating AI if it's not going to provide value. So that's definitely a first step. Then looking at that value and unpacking it more, and determining, okay, well, if it's going to help one team or a process in a specific way, how does that equate to the business value? What's this going to mean for the business if we start to invest in this area? And what are those use cases that are going to come out of that? Using the example of case deflection, like how are we going to handle that if we want to see case deflection? What does that mean for our customer success teams, for our customers, and what are those KPIs? And we start with a couple of different use cases to start with. You don't have to boil the ocean. Just starts with something just to get things moving and get momentum. And then looking at who it impacts. And it's really part of understanding that there are people involved. And, I mentioned before when some of the roadblocks are resistance to change and potentially internally. And some of the things that came out were themes, and just and discussing how this impacts people. There's anxiety, there's concerns, like how is it going to impact my job? And not understanding that, looking beyond that, I guess, is in terms of seeing that, in realizing not that it's going to replace somebody or the work they do, is what could help them and unlock some of those manual tasks and things, so that unblocks them to be able to do more strategic or more valuable things. And then looking at dependencies, looking at the data, looking at things that are going to be required for those use cases. Do you have the data you need or in order to be able to satisfy these use cases? Do you have the knowledge? And when I say knowledge, it's sort of like you thinking about those instructions that you would give an agent. And I'm going to use an agent as an example, as an AI example here. But you think of an agent as like potentially a new person that starts at your organization and doesn't know what to do first, right? You have to give it instructions on onboarding, and the same thing goes with an agent. You have to give them that background in order for the agent to know what they're doing. And so these steps on identifying each of these can help build that roadmap, and it can be iterative. And double clicking a little bit on the data piece that all in itself can be daunting depending on the way that your data is structured and the condition of it. And so there are some things that you can do in order to get ready for incorporating AI into your organization. One is definitely defining like what are potential bad data scenarios that are going on, and then looking at how to address them. So because you already have your use cases, identifying what is the data that needs to get cleaned first, looking at that data and diving in and figuring out, okay, what needs to be cleaned, where there are some, in cases where there's incomplete or inconsistent data, do we need to come up with some standards on values on what we need to do? Then going through cleaning, normalizing that data, and then following some processes, some governance and housekeeping, so that those issues don't happen again or get as insurmountable as they could potentially be to start with. And next slide. Thank you. So the last thing I'll part with is just something that was said in by Emily Boatman, apologies, who is participated in one of our marketing panels, and she really had a great phrase that I think is just something to consider and to remember is using AI to amplify your humanity and not to replace it. So that's something to think about when there are issues about resistance or anxiety about AI. Is it's really there? It's available to us to help, and to just help do our jobs better. We want to keep the human in the loop, definitely, but be able to give our human employees and our team members the space to be able to do amazing things by reducing those manual tasks. And I'll hand it off to Angelica, who's going to talk a little bit about the sales and marketing alignment.
Yes, thank you, Heather. That was awesome. Obviously, as many of you can guess, our AI and innovation workshop that we hosted during MarDreamin Summit was the most attended workshop. And it was so nice to hear. I mean, obviously, this is the industry we're in, right? We're in the tech innovative industry as Circonte, a Salesforce partner. So we've got to be up to speed on these things. So sometimes we're so deep into it, we forget like, what are people really scared of right now? Like getting back to our customers and what our customers are feeling. And the two things that I'm like, oh yeah, duh, of course people are struggling with this that I took away from our own conference was use cases. People are still struggling to say like, we can't use AI today. There's no way. That was one of the things that I heard back from your workshop, Heather. And the other thing was people really are scared. And for us, because we've seen so many different use cases where it's so helpful for humans, if you will, it was just a reminder that there is still some real anxiety. But that was great, Heather. Thank you for that recap. Moving on to what I care about more, sales and marketing alignment. This was just a theme that we could not ignore when putting together this webinar content. We also did host a sales and marketing alignment workshop, but it wasn't just a workshop topic. This came up again and again in sessions, in networking circles, around the cocktail bar, of course, which often turned into much needed vent-in sessions. And no matter what size of the company or how advanced their tech stack was, how many meetings they had, there was always one thing that kept coming up, we found, was just that sales and marketing are still speaking totally different languages in most organizations. And there really is a huge cost of this misalignment that sometimes we don't see right away, which is revenue, right? Now, on this topic, we heard a lot from both sales and marketing across operations, the front lines, right? Salespeople actually selling on the front lines and on the executive level. And what we heard, what is even a qualified lead? There were a lot of sales and marketing heads in the room that, they couldn't align on what an MQL was, what an SQL was. If you asked 5 different people, you got 5 different answers, and they couldn't agree on what a qualified lead meant. So it's no wonder things usually leak through the pipeline, we hear, right? The other thing we heard was cherry picking is real. Sales going through a list and saying, I think this one's going to have the best rate of conversion. This is the one I'm going to focus on. And then what happens to the rest of them? And then, of course, just the handoff. Do we have the right visibility into certain reports that shows us the full picture of what that handoff looks like? Came in as an MQL. It's now a sales accepted lead. What happens then? A lot of questions. And again, it was really a privilege to be a part of these conversations at the workshop. They were so funny to be a part of as well, because there were questions like, what does sales even do all day? What does marketing even do all day? I would love to hear in the chat if you guys experience any of that in your internal orgs, but it was a safe space for everybody to just vent. So we did get a lot of those questions, because when there is no shared dashboard visibility or anything of that sort, it's hard to know what each other are doing. And then the last thing I'll say before jumping into what actually is the breakdown and where does that really happen is back to the people part. There was a lack of feedback, whether people are nervous to say something, or maybe that's just not the culture they have internally. Not hearing what sales exactly needs, not hearing what marketing exactly needs, and having each team know what they need from each other, of course, is always going to cause a challenge. So, at its core, the biggest breakdowns typically we didn't hear about tools specifically, it's about people. 45% said it was about poor communication. And let me be clear, these stats are from Gartner, not our actual workshop people. 43 43% in that report said it was missing data. And what does complete even mean, right? What does complete data even mean? It usually stems from inconsistent data entry, disconnected systems. Are things integrated the right way? And then it's that visibility access. And then 37% said it is due to unclear process. Like, that's where things are breaking down. But here's the thing, if we did things like we improved communication, we brought clarity to processes, and we made our tech easier to use across both departments, we most likely would start to see improvements across alignment. So, what we called the 3 areas where we can start to take action, we call them the 3 top deadly sins for misalignment. So, that essentially meant that there's always room for improvement in each one of these buckets. Again, no matter how big the company was, we found that each one of them had areas of opportunity in either lead process flow, shared reports and dashboards, and joint campaigns. And it really is just focusing on putting together that clear lead flow to streamline that handoff, getting that dashboard created that aligns not only sales goals and marketing goals, but making sure you both have the same goals. So there's one picture that you're looking at. And when these pieces do come together, the cracks in the funnel will close. And ultimately, you'll find that the finger pointing will close too. So, what we have for you in the next slide here is essentially a checklist that you can get started with in each one of these areas, defining what that qualified lead looks like. If you don't have that today, it's probably going to be pretty important to get that on paper so everybody knows what's going on. Map your lead stages, plan your handoff process, put a flow together. When this lead comes in, this is how it gets assigned, this is how it's going to be worked, and what happens when an opportunity is open. Moving on over to shared reports and dashboards, some hot tasks here to get together is just noting any silos in your tools that aren't capturing the data that each team needs. And then the last one, most importantly for me, is joint campaigns, right? So it was common to hear one of the other common issues we found during the workshop was when marketing is putting together a campaign, their messaging doesn't match what sales is saying. So, what is our customer actually experiencing when they're talking to us, or a lead actually experiencing? They're coming in through marketing. Marketing is giving them message A, and then sales is coming in behind marketing. And does that message match up? A lot of teams were questioning whether or not they even had the same message across each one of those intake funnels, if you will. So we encourage you to take that slide that we just saw back to your team, and you will have this entire deck to use. Yeah, here it is. Thank but you will have this entire deck just to use as a resource to go back to your team. But really, what it comes down to is just communicating with one another and being real with each other. Set up those meetings. If you don't have weekly syncs with sales and marketing, get those together. But also ask your teams, like, what is the best way to communicate? We communicate a lot via Slack here internally. That's the best way we've found our sales team likes to communicate. Yes, of course, face-to-face syncs are important, but where is the best channel that we're going to meet our sales team? All right. Now we've got a poll for you, and I will pass it over to Christina to talk through this poll and a few fun things as well, I'll say.
Well, thank you so much for that recap, Angelica. Just like the points that you were hitting on that were like really resonating in the chat with everyone is just like not even speaking the same language. Everyone seems to be working on alignment. This definitely seems to be like a huge pain point and something that is top of mind for our attendees in the audience today. Perhaps it is for you too, if you'll be joining us virtually on demand later on from the recording. But getting to this poll. So if you haven't already answered or responded to this poll of what do you wish your counterpart did more of, go ahead and navigate over to the chat at the top and find the poll, or over in the polls tab and go ahead and respond to that. But really what this is asking about, so if you're in marketing, your counterpart is sales. What do you wish sales did more of? If you are more on the sales side of the house, your counterpart is marketing. What do you wish marketing did more of? And the reason why we're asking this is because this was one of the questions that we asked our sales and marketing leaders on a panel that we led, and it was very eye-opening. So first, I wanted to just kind of take a look at the results that you've all shared. So to answer the question of what do you wish your counterpart did more of, there's a split between provide better feedback and collaborate more often. Those were the top two, as opposed to follow up faster and send over more quality leads. So now again, it looks like one more person voted. So slightly more of a little bit of a lead from provide better feedback. And again, I think that goes back to what Angelica was sharing about the importance of communication. If you're not communicating, there's definitely no way that you're going to be able to get feedback. So whatever that process is for communicating, keep doing that as much as you can. But I want to dive into the panel that we did. So what we did is a match made in revenue. This was like a newlywed style twist on this panel. And this is actually an exercise that we're handing off to you to be able to do with your sales and marketing teams. And I got to give a shout out to our panelists. There's Rachel there front and center. Jasmine's the one off to her right. And then there's Amanda to the left, and then who you don't see on there, as well as Mimi. And then we also had Sarah and Jesse from the Circante team. But what we did is we asked the marketing leaders how they thought sales would be answering these questions. And then on the day of, they got to see if their answers matched up. And then for sales, they had to answer questions in the way that they thought marketing would answer. And then they also got to see if their answers matched up that day. And the majority of them did not, believe it or not. Especially if sales and marketing are speaking two different languages, the answers are probably not going to match up. But really what this is about is being real with each other. And on this slide, you'll see a bunch of questions that marketing and sales, you can sit down and just ask each other, like, what is your number one priority for this quarter? If you can't answer that right now off the top of your head, or you think you know the answer and then you get with sales and they're saying something else, it looks like there needs to be more communication happening for better alignment. Or knowing what their biggest challenge is. Like, you could be asking for feedback on a piece of content that you passed over to sales, but little do you know that sales is knee deep in following up with leads or preparing for their next call or trying to update data in the CRM. So then that way they can have better pipeline reporting. And then these are just some prompts that you can also do to fill in the blank together. And again, what this exercise is really about is for you to sit down, get aligned, and just be real and empathetic with one another. It starts with you. So I'm going to hand it back off to Angelica to close us out for this section. But I hope you all enjoy the exercise if you choose to do it.
Thanks, Christina. That match made in revenue was such a fun session. I had just tossed in the chat. This is something that our own VP of sales and VP of marketing attended. And it was so fun to watch them beef it out. And one of the biggest things that I took away, Jesse, who our VP of sales mentioned, is, I think the question was, what's one thing that you wish the marketing team knew? And his response was, it's not all about like prospecting and reaching out to leads, or it's more like we forget about sales has their own responsibility of building that relationship between customers and that rapport, right? Like 101, of course, but if we're not getting that feedback, like we totally forget that that's something on their radar, and that it takes a lot of TLC to make a lead feel comfortable enough with us to, convert at the end of the day. So it's not all about just chasing outreach, which I loved. I loved hearing. I also found it very interesting in the poll that it was split between, I mean, most responses were provide better feedback and collaborate more often, which is so people based. And I don't know if just like on the Circante within our culture, like how we think is like people first, human first. And maybe this is just so embedded in all of us, but it's so interesting to see that this is still at the core of most organizations. It's our people, and we're all just human first. And that's really what I'm going to leave you with. Is we're human first, and the real change starts with humans. And during the sales and marketing alignment workshop, what you're seeing here is we asked everyone to make a pledge, both sales heads and marketing heads. And it was just heartwarming to see that the human first aspect is still there. And we saw a lot of pledges of marketing putting their self in the shoes of sales for the first time ever. And it was just really nice to see, and vice versa, sales putting themselves in the shoes of marketing. And it was just really nice to see just the love. That's what I'm gonna go with. I know that's cheesy, but it was really nice to see. It was the exact feeling of when you attend conferences and you leave and you're like, oh, or if you go to church for anybody and they do peace be with you, like that feeling. It's like, oh, peace be with you. That's the only thing I can relate it to. All righty, that's enough from me. You'll hear more from me at the end when it comes to resources, but I will pass it over to CCP to talk about analytics, and she's going to be a treat for you guys.
Thank you. Set me up. Yes, one thing that I think was really exciting is I feel like analytics was in the vibe of most conversations, which I think is really exciting. Just to hear that people are thinking day in, day out around analytics, and it's really into the DNA, I think, of what a lot of customers are wanting to move towards. So we'll start off. I think this is kind of a perfect place to talk about some of these challenges that we have with analytics and reporting. So in the poll, one, I'm dying. This is the funniest thing to me. Nobody has selected that they don't know what tool to use. I love that. That was so funny enough. Like, I feel like I got so much of that conversations, but I love that everybody's like, no, I know what tool I'm using. This is great. But what's really interesting, and I think this goes back a lot to what Angelica mentioned earlier, and really what I was hearing a lot at MarDreamin was really it's all about data silos and data quality. It's making sure that we're having that communication and consistency across teams, and that the data quality is there. And so I think that absolutely resonates to what we were hearing boots on the ground too. So just to recap some of the big themes, I feel like truthfully with analytics, it's a very personal thing, right? Analytics is how you are showcasing your department's success, your success, business success. And so it's very, like I said, personal thing. So few themes that jumped out. One of the biggest ones, and I think is like the most consistent, is like, all right, we've moved past this how do we get data portion of the martech world. It's more now of like, okay, we got so much, that's enough slices. How do I actually now pare it down, right? And so how do we make sure we're getting quality data, and how are we using that for it to make sense? And then again, it's all about quality versus quantity. I think that's really the name of the game. The tech stack keeps getting bigger. How can we make sure that what we're looking at and how we're analyzing it is quality stuff? One of my favorites, and this was like in a lot of different panels, but I think also just like one-on-one conversations that I was hearing. Surprisingly enough, with analytics, I don't think, well, this part's not surprising. Accounts still such a big deal. Everybody still wants to talk ABM, and how do we align our analytics to like an account review. But there's also, now we're moving into more of this buyer group, which is like the new fun buzzword, but it's so important. And I think what I love about this and why I want to call it out is it's likening back to, I think, this silo between sales and marketing, where if we're looking at buyer groups and we're in lockstep with our sales team of who these buyer groups are, that's only going to benefit marketing, and reporting is how we can determine if that's successful or not. So loved hearing that. And then I think also this theme of like, we know analytics is in the DNA, but how do you create an audience dashboard, right? How do we create a dashboard that's geared towards not only having those communications between the team, but one that is centralized and that people can dive into? And again, I think it's so funny. Nobody said this one, but this came up a lot of like, okay, but how do we pick? How do we know which reporting tool? Because there's tons out there now. Which one best aligns with our use case, and our business needs, right? And there's many different like levers you would pull to decide on a reporting tool. And so that was like a hot button topic with a lot of different people. And then alignment, right? Again, this is going back to the same theme we're hearing in and out, is just how do you make sure that your KPIs are truly aligning with business value and that support business direction with true data, but that you're not just doing that in a silo, you're doing that with, in conjunction with your other teams. Okay, this one this actually is only two people that brought these like similar ideas up, but I was like, I feel like the frontier, this is where a lot of people are going, but like competitor dashboards, like how are we measuring up against competitors? And that surprisingly came up twice, that I was like, oh, this is absolutely your gut checking. How are your competition doing against you? And so there was a lot of different conversations of how do you get that type of data in, to be able to report and make decisions, which I thought was just absolutely brilliant, and one I thought was really innovative. And then again, it's more about like just sophisticated with a marketing data. How do we go past just views? How do we look at like intention and engagement? When we're using specifically Google Analytics, how do we make sure we're having a lot of intentionality behind that? So many cool use cases that I think have similar themes, but really exciting different conversations we had during MarDreamin for sure. And so I will say, like, for me, this is like my favorite thing to talk about because, and whoever put this Post-it note on the board at MarDreamin, I just want to say for the record, I love you. I'm in love with you. You're my favorite person ever. Thank you for writing this. But this is like my theme. This is my motto, that like reporting and analytics are different. Reporting is a what, right? Reporting is what happened. Now that's part of the process. You've got to have data, like that's raw, right? But analytics is why. Analytics is really there putting context behind what happened and then making those decisions of what to do next. And so this was like, I love this quote of like, lean into analytics and analysis, not just reporting. Absolutely. I think that's so key in the process. So with that, one of the things that we talked about in the presentation was really around like, how do we take that raw data that we might get in a report and put it into action? And so when we think about data and like at that base level, again, you have to have that to be able to have true analysis and insight. And so think of the data layer as really it's just telling us what happened. Again, that theory of what. So it's really collecting that data without context. It's raw metrics, raw numbers, but we don't have context around what that is, right? This could be something as simple as I have 10 open opportunities. Like there's no context around that, right? That's just a what. So the insights really comes into that analysis layer, and we're applying, what we've, an explanation or what we've learned. We're asking additional questions. And if you attend to my session, this is where I made a really bad joke about The Devil Wears Prada, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. But it's like movie analysis a little bit too, right? If I said Andy got the job, then had some fun and then got fired, like that's not the plot, but where's the analysis, right? And so that's where we're putting in that context and insight. And you want to do that with your reporting process as well. So we're looking for patterns. We're seeing if there's gaps, things to change, opportunities. That's that insight. And I see most customers dabble between these two layers, right? That data layer and that insights layer. But the action piece is truly where I think this sets people apart and where we drop off. And actions is where like you really want to aim for. This is how we put in to change things. This is how we drive tactical responses to what we're analyzing. And so I just think like I like this visual for me. I'm such a visual person that this helps me kind of think through, all right, making sure you're hit to that next step. So, and one of the things that we've really identified is a lot of this is starting with like a question. And so if we flip this mentality between just like reporting a question, but we're asking questions of our data that help drive business values, that's where we start seeing that big shift with insight, right? And so again, don't just start with a report and kind of like throw spaghetti at a wall, see what sticks, but like really start with like, what are you trying to do? Some business questions, right? Where are we losing people in the funnel? Which channels are driving, not just leads, right? That's pretty easy. Hey, this channel has X amount of leads, but what's driving actual revenue, right? More business driving values. And then I love this, like what content are those highly valued prospects, right? Those higher grade or higher scored value prospects, what are they engaging with? That indicates value and content that resonates. And so that helps with that business driver. So we talked about this concept of like transitioning your weak questions to like a more stronger, better business question, right? So instead of saying like, okay, how many clicks did I get on this email? Right? What emails led to meetings booked for my SDR team, right? Or how many website visits? I mean, how common is that one? I feel like we talk about that all the time. But it's like, okay, well, what pages are those like higher valued or higher lifetime value customers? What are they landing on maybe before they purchase or a part of their journey? Right. And so these, like, it's just a little minor tweak. They're still in the same realm, but we're making that difference of actually doing a business value question. And again, my favorite one's like, how did this campaign perform? I'm sure every single person, if you haven't asked this, yeah, you're lying. And I know you have. Everybody asks this question, right? But like, did this campaign move the needle on pipeline? Like that to me is just like, again, that minor tweak, but makes the world of difference in your analysis process. So again, start with a question. And we talked through two like business use cases of like, okay, again, I think most commonly with marketers, it's coming down to, all right, how am I analyzing the behavior of my customers and prospects? And then also, how am I looking at my campaign performance, right? And so little things that make a difference and tweak, it's like, with customer behavior, I'm looking at engagement trends, right? And I'm looking at that over time. I want to see, some actions that maybe are higher intent, and that way I can push those types of content that have that higher intent quicker, further reducing that sales cycle. Even things like retention signals. I mean, that's a big one that a lot of times marketers can play a big part in with helping retention. So looking at like engaged leads versus those that drop off, and so we're just switching that conversation a little bit. And then with measuring campaign performance, I know a big one for us was also like just going beyond clicks, right? Instead of just saying like open rates, click through rates, think about like pipeline created and velocity. One of my favorite customers actually talked about this too, where we're looking at like, are we influencing velocity of an opportunity once it's even created and they're still in the conversation, right? Marketing tends to be really one-on like lead generation. That's like marketing 101. But marketers nowadays are like definitely hitting more of that stage 3, stage 4 content to help deals close. And so we shouldn't, forget about that when we're thinking about content and when we're reporting. And then again, just little things like time-based processes and performances, segmenting campaigns based off audiences, but then analyzing that persona, like who is this working for a certain audience and whom, if not, how do we tweak it? And taking those different actions. So tons of different use cases, but again, it's just taking that next step a little bit further. Also is my new favorite picture of myself, and I'm going to put this on my LinkedIn profile. But with that being said, like it's all about taking that action-oriented analysis, right? So instead of just being an observer of your data, take an action approach, right? Like when you see or taking a report and you're analyzing ask questions like, what should we stop, start, or optimize? And that little tweak is taking you to that action level layer, right? So we're not just taking analysis, really taking it up to how do we have an action? And then this is one for me that's like really putting it into your day to day. Who needs to know about this, right? Audience is so key. And then what should they do about it? Those little tweaks will help take to that action layer as well. And again, my favorite quote that just I think resonates and I'm sure is something we all can deal with now, but like it's not that we need more data. We've got the data. We've got it in, everywhere. It's just like how do we actually use it? How do we use smarter uses of this data to improve our marketing process? All right. So I talked enough, made really bad jokes. I'm gonna kick it back to Angelica.
Thanks, CCP. All right. Before I jump into resources, and we've just got a whole bunch of items, again, you will receive this deck. Every slide has a QR code. So if you want to get your phones ready, grab them now. The other thing that you can do is start to drop any specific questions that you have in the chat. If we don't have time by the end, we've got a solid 7 minutes left. But if we don't have time by the end, we individually will reach out and respond to your question and make sure you're taken care of. All right. The first resource is, if you haven't seen this already, I highly encourage you to download this. This is a 70-page plus ebook that it's going to bring to you a lot of aha moments. This is something that we collaborated with all of our sister brands. And essentially, what's imperative for growth in 2025 with all of this new technology coming up, with all of these shifts in buying coming up, what are the key areas that you should be focusing on? So this ebook is really going to be a guide for you. I want to even stretch it for 2 years, the next year or two, for you to really start to dive in and put your next year strategy and plan together based on a lot of these umbrellas, really is what I'll say. And the next slide, the best piece of advice or resource that I could give you guys is just to get started, right? Get started on everything that we've talked about today. The AI use cases, it's overwhelming to think, where do we even begin? Sales and marketing, where do we even begin, right? We know the things that are happening. And also for analytics, the best place to start is auditing everything. And if you fall into the category of, yes, I'm ready to help for Serconte to help me define our AI use cases, go ahead and scan this QR code, request that assessment for us, and we'll get you started. And some free resources we have for you. The Spot, which is the Circante blog, where we have a number of blogs going up on a daily, weekly basis. Some that fall on the technical sides of things. How do you set this up? We have a lot of our product directors, Heather, CCP, that you just heard from, that will blog everything that they're finding. We know that Salesforce has their release notes, but it's our team that we're going heads down and we're figuring out the bugs, the real talk, the lessons learned, and we are creating blog posts. So that is called The Spot. And then we always have training. We have training courses that we do on a quarterly, monthly basis, but you can also request private training for your team. Let's see here. What else do we have? Next slide is just, what are your real next steps into action? If you're looking for, okay, now what do I do? Other than just get started, just do the damn thing, in the words of our CEO, she likes to say, is just start questioning everything. How do I make our processes better internally? How do I make our buying process more seamless, where we're thinking about the customer first? What is our next step with AI? And again, it doesn't have to be, we're launching AI tomorrow. That's not going to be your first step. Your first step is identifying your use cases, or just talking through what type of value would we find from AI. Getting sales and marketing together. Again, your first step doesn't have to be, we are launching brand new processes by the end of April. Probably not going to happen, right? Maybe your first step is launching out a survey, putting everybody on a call and say, real talk, how are we all feeling? And then on that analytics piece is really just beginning to ask more of those high value, revenue driven questions. Look at your reports that exist today. Look at your dashboards that exist today. Do they answer questions, or do they just show data? Do they answer real questions that you're receiving? And then next up, of course, the Circante team is always on the go. You know that. And if you don't, now you do. We are heading to Connections next. It's in Chicago, just 3 weeks from now. We will be in the Agentforce Pavilion, where we will have our AI and Agentforce team on site, and they will be given real life demos. Our team is responsible for setting up over 50 agents and launching 50 agents with customers as of today. So if you're wondering, or most importantly, if you're headed to Connections, definitely connect with us. We want to meet with you on site. And that's all I have for you guys. I think Patrick Myers, you were at MarDreamin. I remember your name. Let me say this question here. We've got 3 upvotes for it. So I love the idea of competitor dashboard. Any tips on how to get started? Okay, this was welcome, CCP. I'm glad you joined.
No, I
Um,
love this one. This is such a good question. And there's a couple of different ways you can take this. And the 2 big identifiers that we went through is a lot of, like, I would say, like, digital competitive intelligence, right? So looking at things like SEO, website traffic, like that type of stuff, I think is a big one. Account engagement actually has a competitive um, uh, feature that you can kind of look a little bit of, like, rankings and just like how you're doing. But you can take a lot of that data and get it into a dashboard with some API work. That's kind of the use case we were talking to a lot on at MarDreamin. But the other one that came up that I thought was kind of interesting as a place to get started, like something you can do today, is actually do this analysis against your lost opportunities to a competitor, right? And so that's really imperative to have your sales team. And I think a lot of people probably do this, but this is like super powerful, of like having your sales team truly actually log, why was this lost, right? If this was lost because of a price to a competitor, like that's still competitive analysis, right? And those things that you can take and review from the opportunity objects and have a breakdown. And so that was like when we dived into a lot, is like taking those little things that, if you're having it, because you're logging all that in Salesforce, ideally, you can then have that be a part of your breakdown. So a lot of different use cases, but I loved this one. Again, having a, not only what are we doing internally against our competitors, but then like online resources that we can get to through like SEO and stuff like that.
Love that, Kara. Thank you so much for answering Patrick's question. And Patrick, thank you so much for asking the question. I'm sure that, again, a competitor dashboard isn't always something that that teams are thinking about when they have so much going on. But to the point about when Kara was having those conversations on site in your question, like it's a great idea just to have a pulse on where you're standing and measuring up, especially in those competitive deals, and getting that insight ahead of time and what some of those leading indicators might look like. So with that, that is all the time that we have for today. I greatly appreciate you all for being here. A big thank you to our speakers, Angelica, Kara, Heather. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with everyone. We greatly appreciate it. Again, we'll be sending out the recording. We'll be sending out the slides. Thank you again. And if you do have any questions that come to mind later on as you're thinking about everything that we discussed today, go ahead and reach out to us. We're always down to chat. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.